dealing here? Oh man, I have to show the final position there as they start the next game. I wanted, okay, just to show there are so many ways for a fun mate to happen here. Bishop takes f3 is one, because if you take queen h3 is actually mate in one. Rook takes g2 right away does work. That was the combo I was talking about earlier, followed by queen g4. And no matter where you go, we're taking in some way or another and mating. But rook f2 check is also the forcing and maybe easiest. Maybe then he would have played rook takes g2 followed by some kind of checkmate like this. So, wow, Wesley So strikes back. Title of your autobiography, Robert.
I don't know about my autobiography, but if I am
wouldn't that be an awesome autobiography? Wesley So strikes back. The story of Robert Hess.
That made absolutely no sense, but it made me laugh, so good job. But what I was going to say, Danny, is what you took as my criticism of you, I was actually being complimentary, because you are a very aggressive attacking player. And while sometimes these sacrifices don't work, it's important to keep those ideas in the back of your mind. So even if there's this idea of rook takes g2, and you say, okay, it doesn't work here, but let me store that information. Let me come back to it in the time it does. And in fact, once Wesley put the bishop on e3, he blocked the queen's protection of the f3 square, and then rook takes g2 was working. So it was a props to Danny for really always forcing me to think tactically, even if I want to be that positional player who's talking about the nuances of the pawn structure.
I love how people think that we hate each other. The love here is so deep, so deep. Well, I guess apparently maybe I'm the problem right now. I applied a commentator's jinx and revealed that behind the scenes I saw Hikaru Nakamura as being the heavy favorite today, despite what the on-paper prediction said is close to a toss-up. And as soon as I revealed my private communication in Slack, which you confirmed was true, Hikaru sees a 4-game lead go down to a 2-game lead. And if Wesley So gets this game, we're talking a 1-game match heading to a 3-minute portion. And by the way, the 3-minute portion is Wesley So's favorite portion, right? I mean, everyone knows that he has been... It's one of the only portions that Magnus Carlsen ever lost when he was playing in the Speed Chess Championship match. For those who didn't follow that, the only segment that Wesley So won versus Magnus Carlsen in their match back in 2017 was actually the 3-minute portion. So Wesley So is maybe the best 3-minute or 3+1 player in the SCC format. So this match is not over.
And Danny, I've stopped being so attentive to it, but earlier in the match, Wesley was getting to a time advantage consistently against Hikaru. And the last few games, I admit that I have been paying less attention to the clocks and more to the action, but that seems to bode well for his chances. If he can keep the pace that he's shown in the early stages of the game, Hikaru will have less time to figure things out, and of course, vice versa. But Wesley has been playing quite well in this match, I would say, for the most part, despite his disadvantage. Hikaru has played excellently himself. I think game 3 in particular was a really nicely played opening and then game by Hikaru. And the 2-game lead for Hikaru certainly makes sense.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess there's 2 ways to look at that storyline depending on whose corner you're in as a coach, right? If you're Hikaru, you're like, look, dude, you haven't maybe started off games on the right foot. You've been worse against Wesley consistently, yet you're up in the match. So just, find yourself and you'll be great, right? And if you're Wesley, you're like, look, dude, you've been better, right? You've just failed in the critical moments, but you've been better. So just stay the course, stay the ship, and eventually the wins will work itself out, right? And I think that from a psychological perspective, both are valid, but it just depends on the mindset you're trying to get yourself in. This will likely be our last 5-minute game for those of you tuning in to the SCC final presented by Regium, an automatic chessboard you can research and look into yourself. But if Hikaru takes a 2-game lead, I think you'd still say he was pretty thrilled heading into the 3-minute portion. So a draw is probably a successful result. But I'm liking Wesley's position already as white. Hikaru is down a minute on the clock. D6 is a problem. Robert, this could be a 1-game lead here in a minute.
And I mean, I'm not liking the look of this position for black. Yep. I like Wesley's time advantage. And the reason why you and I both like white's position, for starters, you're fully developed. And now knight d4 takes c6 just looks pretty decent to me. And that leaves black with a worse pawn structure, but a better bishop.
Yep.
So the bishop gets to b7, and it's a happier piece than it is otherwise. But that said, the one thing I don't like about white's position, well, 2 things, is the light square pawns on the queen side, which means that if that bishop on c8 gets active at some point, watch out for that pawn chain to fall. So that's one thing. Second thing I don't like is the king on h1. Like this looks like a very normal position. Well, better for white normal position, but with a king on h1, whereas I'd prefer it to be already be on g1 running towards the center. So those are the two things that I don't like about white's position. Everything else I love. It's clearly better for white.
Well, he plays f3 first, a little bit of a tempo before capturing c6, which I think is a good intermezzo. And the reason is that you not only guard this diagonal, as you already highlighted, black is going to bring the bishop there, but also maybe you open up the second rank for ideas like king g1 and rook f2 to ultimately defend against black's e-file. So f3, a tricky little swish and zoog here, but I kind of like it. And now white is going to take c6 next.
And after knight takes c6, you'd want to play knight e5 for black, but then there's knight e7 check to d5, things like that, where there forks galore.
That's forksome. That's a forking problem if I've ever seen one. Hikaru takes a swig of water, though. Wesley is clearly better here. I think just trying to figure out the right approach. I'm a little curious. Wow, he goes out of his way again to avoid taking the pawn. What an interesting decision that the computer really doesn't like. Feels like white's advantage was just clear. Just take the pawn and ask questions later, right? d6 is still weak. There's no way you're not better. But one thing I do like about rook e1 is he's saying, I want to take advantage of the other weakness in black's camp, which is the lack of development. And if we trade and I get access to the e-file before your rook is in the game, I might still be much, much better here. I kind of like Wesley's move the more I think about it.
Yeah, it's quite frustrating to deal with for Hikaru. And the reason why is you look at a position like, well, that knight takes c6 just looked very good for Wesley. And now, even though black is still up a pawn, it hasn't been captured yet, the position is one where white is still holding the cards and f4 played. I hate this king is on h1. It just somehow is really bothering me. And now an additional thought I'm having is maybe there's some susceptibility to back rank checkmates. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. But if that black rook can somehow get open, then the white king on h1 is not too happy.
So he gets bishop b7, but now knight e7 check.
Just move your king.
King f7, and Hikaru is actually
king f7. There's knight f5 and d6 is. So he goes king f8 just to be safe about that.
Okay, yeah, because knight f5 would have again potentially led to some forking problems on d6. So, but the obstacle bishop ending, you got to feel better if you're Hikaru, at least in terms of how bad your position's been. As I say that, he did lose an obstacle bishop ending not too long ago. So rook to e8 played.
You know why he did this, Danny? Look at the light pawns on the queen side. C2, b3, a4. Here it comes.
Earlier, here they go. Black recognizing the potential of these weaknesses could indeed save the draw here for Hikaru. He's losing all of his pawns, but the problem is white's going to lose at least two of them to go with it. So c3 doesn't stop bishop c2.
He's going to go up a pawn, though. So bishop c2, there's bishop takes a5.
Well, I think he's going to... Oh, I thought he was going to play b4.
He's going to try to go up a pawn here and take d6.
Just have the healthy c-pawn, okay.
It's just an easy blockade.
Got it.
That's the problem, is with a light square bishop against a dark square bishop, it means if I put my bishop on c4, you can't kick me out unless you get your king active.
Yep. This should probably be a draw now, even if you lost g7. Speaking of pawns stuck on the wrong color square, white has a dark square bishop, but if you're holding light squares, probably drawing.
Yep. And king f7 back. And I think Wesley, this is the last game of the time control, right? So Wesley should just continue to play on. But how can he actually make progress? Danny?
g5, he's going to allow the double g pawns to be the only ones that remain, but okay. Interesting move g4 by Wesley, trying to leave black with a long-term problem over here on a dark square. Bishop b2, Hikaru says, no thank you, I shall blockade.
And what you said holds true, that even if you lose one of these g-pawns, still great chances, but no reason why you have to give anything up. And a big issue for white's chances is that the pawn on g4 is in a light square. So your king starts running to the queen side, I'm just going to attack your light square pawn.
Here comes bishop d1 check or bishop e6. Okay, as I highlighted a moment ago, either diagonal is fine, and if you play h3, you just commit another pawn to a light square, so moves like bishop c4 will immediately threaten bishop f1. So wow, I mean, you can hear it in our tone, right, as far as where this match has been, up by 4 at one point for Hikaru, now down to 2, but it feels like a bit of the wind has been stolen from Wesley So's sails here, just given if Hikaru draws this, which looks like he's about to do. Now, again, you're only down 2, you were down by 4. You got to be feeling a lot better about your chances if you're Wesley, but still, this was a game that Wesley really would have liked to have gotten.
Yeah. And I think, as you pointed out, the 3-minute segment is Wesley's best.
Got to be.
So he's got to be happy that he's cut this deficit, and it gives him legitimate chances.
Right.
He just cannot afford to go on that kind of losing streak and just misplaying good positions like he did in the 5-minute portion, because you're starting to run out of time.
Well, he has all the time in the world in terms of the total match clock. Remember, everybody, that the 5-minute portion is over, but we still have 60 minutes of 3-minute blitz, followed by a half an hour of bullet. So there's still a lot left here, and despite what was once a huge lead for Hikaru, we do indeed have a match heading into Wesley So's best portion in the format, at least historically. So can't wait to see where this goes. This game does end in peace, as predicted.